Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on Senate Bill 1466. And to borrow something from Lancaster County lore, those who enjoy budgets and/or sausage should not watch either being made. And this week certainly bears that out. We are in the thick of deliberations over this year's budget, but Mr. Speaker, it is my contention that this budget meets the challenges we face as a Commonwealth. And what are our challenges? What are the challenges that we face? Well, we know we have a continuing period of chronically high unemployment. Some of my colleagues are speaking about the joblessness that many of our fellow citizens face, and it is a very real issue if you're one of those people out there who can't find that all-important job. We now are at a 7.5% unemployment rate in this state, and Mr. Speaker, that extends back over a 3-year period. Significant chronic long-term unemployment plagues our state. Mr. Speaker, we know that we are in a weak business environment. In fact, the national level GDP growth for the first quarter was just a 1.9% annualized rate, a very sluggish economy. And what does it mean when we have chronic unemployment and weak business activity? Well, Mr. Speaker, it means diminished tax revenues to the state. Unfortunately, our tax revenues, Mr. Speaker, are at 08-09 levels. And that is why we are constrained in this budget. What does it mean when you have diminished revenues? It means tough choices, difficult choices have to be made. Mr. Speaker, in their wisdom, the leaders of an earlier time put a balanced budget amendment in our state's constitution, perhaps one of the best things that they did. But what that forces us to do here on this floor and in this government is make real-time decisions, current year decisions about our spending priorities. We can't do what they do down in Washington. We can't print money endlessly. We can't accumulate mountains of debt. We have to make our tough choices in the current year. And that is what we are doing with this budget. Every budget, Mr. Speaker, contains things that each member likes and some things that each member does not like. And for the record, I'd like to share a few concerns that I have with this year's budget. Mr. Speaker, this year's budget projects a revenue growth of 3.1%. I just mentioned that 1.9% annualized growth rate, and I think we are being a little bit aggressive, quite frankly, with that projected revenue rate. But in the spirit of hopeful optimism, let's do hope that we reach that level of growth and that we can fund that level of spending. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this budget and the package around it are a bit short on business tax reform initiatives that I would personally like to see. Earlier this year in this chamber, behind the leadership of my good friend from Indiana County, Representative Reed, we put through a package which dealt with the Delaware loophole, and the other side of that equation was that we dealt with some serious business tax reforms, a reduction in the corporate net income tax rate, which is frankly the second highest rate in the nation. It dealt with many other tax rates and frankly was a very good package. And that's not embodied in this. I would like to have seen that as a part of this overall package. And then on the spending side, yes, Mr. Speaker, there's many of us here that would like to see a few more dollars thrown toward intellectual disability funding, and I join that group who would like to see more done in that area. It's my hope that in the future we can address that issue in a significant way. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, in the area of reforms, I do believe, though, that growth is what is going to pull us out of the malaise that we're in, the mire that we're in. Private sector growth. But there are many positives in this year's budget. And I see that I'm running short on time. I'll go through them quickly. This budget will be completed on time. In contradiction to what my colleague across the aisle said, I do believe that this is a no tax increase budget. We continue the CSFT, capital stock and franchise tax phase out. We've moved to a single sales factor apportionment for multi-state businesses. And we've put accountability block grants back in our education funding landscape, and we have dealt with distressed school district funding. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, this is a balanced budget. We have balanced the budget. Perhaps to the extent that all of us can find something to not like in this budget, we have struck the proper balance. That seems to be the mark of good legislation. And I think we've reached that that objective. And so, Mr. Speaker, I again assert and I say that this budget meets the challenges that we face as a Commonwealth, and I ask for an affirmative vote. Thank you.
Chair.